Well, just one day after extending the deadline for introducing higher tariffs on key trading partners, the Trump administration has announced yet more tariffs for a spate of countries. Japan and South Korea imports are among those to be slogged with raised levies from August the 1st, but the US has left the door open to more extensions. Let's get more on this with APAC Advisors Chief Executive Steve Okun. Steve, good to have you with us again this evening now. Donald Trump, he's written some quite interesting letters that we've seen to the Japanese Prime Minister and the South Korean President, and among others. Now, the essence was basically to address trade deficits with those two countries at least, but he's giving them more time. So what is Donald Trump playing at here?
Now, Donald Trump knows he has all the cards in his parlance when it comes to Japan and South Korea in particular, and he is going to play those, and he is going to put as much pressure as he can to get a deal that is completely in the interest of the United States. Doesn't matter that Japan and South Korea are two treaty allies of the United States. Doesn't matter that they are key to really U.S. engagement in the Indo-Pacific. It doesn't matter that there was a free trade agreement, or is a free trade agreement, that he signed with South Korea. He amended the FTA with South Korea, signed his own agreement with Japan. That is all irrelevant. So Donald Trump is going to use all the leverage he can to get the best deal for the United States, and it is going to hurt the economies of Japan and South Korea, and I think it's going to hurt the United States geopolitically long term.
Yes, and do you think Japan and South Korea will be making any sort of concessions?
It is a very difficult choice for them because you can't negotiate right now with the United States because the United States is not giving all the information needed to its, and I'll use this term loosely, trading partners. Right? Because what Japan and South Korea want to know is if we negotiate with you, we need to be certain, and this is what trade agreements are all about, we need to be certain that the rules are going to be set going forward so that people and businesses and investors can make long-term decisions. And the United States is saying, we're only going to negotiate with you on these reciprocal tariffs, these tariffs that are in place because of the president's use of national emergency and national security terms. But you've got other tariffs that are looming out there on autos, on steel, on aluminum, on semiconductors, on wood and lumber, and everything else. And the United States is not saying that that is not going to go and let the countries of Japan, South Korea, and others get hit. That's why they can't negotiate, because they don't know what they're negotiating. It would be a real problem for them to give in at this point.
Yes, I mean, noting as well that, companies like Hyundai Motors in South Korea, they've invested $21 billion to have plants and factories in the U.S. To be able to circumvent future tariffs. Looks like Donald Trump hasn't seen them. But on the side of South Korea and Japan, would this be somewhat damaging for the leaders of both countries, that they've perhaps been seen as a bit of a failure by two leaders by the respective electorates?
They're clearly in a no-win situation because if they hold tight, it is going to hurt their economies probably significantly in the short term. If they cave in, that is also not the look you want of your leader. And people in particular are being unfair to the current Japanese administration because they're saying, oh, look how great a job Prime Minister Abe did in managing the U.S.-Japan relationship. And look what great a job he did in building a relationship with Donald Trump. Look, it's not fair because Trump 1.0 was an America First foreign policy. Trump 2.0 is turning out to be a Trump First policy. And Donald Trump is making up different rules as it goes along. So you really have to feel from a domestic political perspective for the leaders of Japan and South Korea, they really are in a no-win situation right now.
Yes, and both those countries are critical strategic allies in the face of China's growing influence, but also that of North Korea. So is Donald Trump risking a diplomatic fallout as well?
I mean, look, there's no question China is driving some of this, and it's really driving it if we want to talk about Southeast Asia, which got particularly hit hard by these tariffs announced by the president yesterday, in 25, 30, up to 40% even in Southeast Asia. And the ire of the United States on Southeast Asia is because Southeast Asia is seen as a transshipment point, both legal and from a trade perspective, legal and illegally, in that Chinese investment, Chinese Chinese goods are coming to Southeast Asia and being exported to the United States, and that is being seen as a workaround. Now, the president in the United States should be working with Japan and South Korea and Southeast Asia because everybody has a lot of the same concerns about China. They have concerns about Chinese excess capacity. They have concerns about Chinese unfair trade practices. But instead of working collectively, Donald Trump is going all in on a one-on-one bilateral approach. And we have to see, is this going to actually backfire long-term on the United States and push Japan and South Korea and other countries closer to China than they want to be?
And in the case of some of the countries you mentioned, you talked about Southeast Asia, Laos, Myanmar, Thailand have pretty high rates, up to 40%. That is the threat, at least. It's not been implemented yet. What else can countries like that, the poorer countries of Southeast Asia, particularly Laos and Myanmar, even offer? Or are they just going to be resigned to whatever Donald Trump might or might not do?
The two things they can offer is to lower their tariffs on U.S. products coming into their countries. They can also address really serious non-tariff barriers that foreign businesses have in those countries. It could be restrictions on data flows. It could be cumbersome legal requirements. It could be tax rules that are not beneficial. And they could be offering those, but they're not going to offer what Donald Trump wants. Look, they don't have the money to buy Boeing aircraft. They don't have the money to buy the goods the U.S. manufactures. They don't have the money to invest in the United States. So unclear if he's going to hold those countries to lowering their trade deficit with lowering the United States trade deficit with them. They can't do that.
Yes, and how do you see markets, finally, Steve, how do you see markets reacting? Because it seems like investors might just be thinking that perhaps Donald Trump is playing chicken. He'll ultimately, not carry through. That's how the market has been looking. Do you think that might still continue to be the pattern in the next couple of weeks?
It depends. It depends in large part on China, because look, Japan and South Korea, as important they are as global economies, they're not going to move the United States market. They don't have leverage over the United States. You know who has leverage over the United States? Of course, that's China. Yeah. And if Japan and South Korea enter into an agreement with the United States that restricts trade between China and South Korea and Japan, and then China retaliates, that will move the market. So I think the word of the day, of the week, of the month, of the nearly 6 months of Donald Trump's presidency, it's uncertainty. We still have uncertainty. We're going to have uncertainty going forward. And we're all waiting to see what happens between the U.S. and China, and also China and these other countries. That is where we will find out if Trump always chickens out really does happen this time.
Okay, we'll see. Steve Okun, always great to get your analysis there from Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you.